hey, you've got this thing happening, this condition happening, and you've probably become very aware of it from a medical standpoint. What if there's other conditions? Have you considered, do any of these things tick a box in your past? If so, you could also be dealing with an emotional component to this. And hey, come to Mind Change, that's what we specialize in. Welcome back to the Mind Change podcast. I'm your host, Heather McKean. And today we have a special episode, and Kent is here to join me again for a Q&R, so questions and responses. So we're going to be doing these periodically through the season. We did one last year, right? Last season. And so we sent a little thing out on the social media saying, hey, please send us your questions. And we are going to try to answer some of those questions today or respond. Question and response. So we're going to respond today.
Yes. We do not have all the answers. I'm sorry. But we can respond to your questions. So.
Yes. Thanks for sending these in, guys. I will just say that we appreciate you guys asking your questions and getting vulnerable and diving deep into that. And we're here to try to respond and help as much as we can. So thanks.
All right, let's go with the first one. It says, in listening to the podcast about the drivers behind high blood pressure and arthritis, I clearly hear myself in your descriptions, as I'm sure many people have in different episodes. This likely means that I'm setting myself up for having high blood pressure and arthritis, which I don't currently have. How can I avoid getting high blood pressure and arthritis if I currently experience these drivers? Can you explain and teach us the self-directed mind change procedure that will eliminate the drivers from the current life, thus eliminating the possibility of coming down with these ailments? Thank you so much, Caitlin.
Great.
Interesting statements in there.
Yes, Caitlin. It's always so challenging to do these when we can't engage with the person and ask more questions. So much of the mind change method that is question asking and getting deeper and unlayering. And so we will do our best. So thank you, Caitlin. Okay. I'm actually really glad this question came up because it addresses some of the mindset behind the emotional drivers. And the emotional drivers series isn't like part and parcel with the mind change method. It's not like you have to know what the emotional drivers are behind any disease or illness or anything like that to help clear it, change it, make changes. This is more of a pet project for myself, something that I like, something that I find is helpful, and that as a practitioner informs me sometimes deeper into what people are dealing with. They aren't necessarily meant to be guides for change.
And I'll add to that, they are definitely not meant to be like, do you have these, emotional drivers? Then beware, because so it's definitely not for that either.
No. So the emotional drivers are kind of like, it's a little bit like the way we talk about epigenetics or, environmental factors combined with genetic factors, which they say that genetics load the gun and environment pulls the trigger is often what people will say. So what I will say about the emotional drivers is that there's a lot of overlapping conditions too. So I'd say in the majority of the emotional drivers, you're going to hear in the childhood section of that, like, did you not have a voice as a child? Were you abandoned, neglected, rejected? So it doesn't mean that if these were the cases in your childhood, you are definitely going to produce high blood pressure or arthritis or some other various condition.
And with that, I just want to reiterate that you asked, or you said, this likely means I'm setting myself up for. high blood pressure? No.
No.
Definitely does not. So just kind of get that, clear.
That's a belief that you might need to use some mind change to work out and to change. So it's more of someone who's battling this illness, this disease, who may have tried a lot of things, who might be stuck in Western mainstream medicine, and they're not seeing any shift in this thing or feel like there's nothing they can do about it. The Emotional Driver series is more to help people understand that there are factors at play that might not be considered. And that's just basically that a lot of our childhood and initial programming shows up later in life if it's not dealt with. And it shows up in various ways, and disease and illness is just one of them. So again, it doesn't mean if you had this sort of home, you're going to have this sort of disease show up in your body. If you do have, so please, Caitlin, don't be planning to have high blood pressure and arthritis. If you see things in your childhood that are counterproductive, we would say, to maybe a healthy, happy life as an adult, that's the stuff that Mind Change is here for. Change it. Change it. And I think she asked, what was the last thing about?
Well, it was, can you explain, and teach us how, teach us the self-directed mind change procedure? Probably not on podcast.
It is in the book though. So we're not like gatekeeping or, trying to hold this information and only get it out to people who are willing to pay. No, it's not like that. Everything is in the book. Some people get it and it clicks and they just roll with it and change their lives based on the information in the book. Other people need a little bit more. They either need some more support, they need more of the science behind it. There might be more that they need for that to click.
They need maybe more walkthrough, more explanation, more like step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of thing.
And there are other people who need to come in and have multiple sessions with a mind change practitioner to get the ball rolling, to get change initiated. So we're really here to sort of meet anybody where they're at. We've got the course. So the initial course, the Module 1 course, is literally set up for people who read the book or even didn't read the book and who are like, I want to know how to do this for myself.
Yep. How to learn the system and work on yourself.
And it is a deep dive into that, into doing this for yourself. So again, I'd love to be able to just basically, I can give you the basic overview on the podcast, which is find the bother, find how you're representing the bother, and then pattern interrupt and shift that bother. That's the most basic foundation. And that is a really powerful tool. It is a beginner tool, I would say, because as we go through and you do more and you shift more, it's like building a relationship with your subconscious mind. The more that you learn to be trustworthy with what comes up and to be able to change those things, then it's like the mind gives you more or the body gives you more. It's like, oh, we're doing this now. Great. So here's the next thing and the next thing. So the course gives you the community along with more information, access to personalized retreats to help people go deeper into the self-work. So we have a lot of different avenues for that to help people.
I'm going to actually skip to this question that's at the end because I think it relates to this. It's from Rebecca. This is on YouTube, I believe. It's, does your book and the handbook tell you how to identify the events, behaviors, and emotional drivers that cause the physical symptom and help you form a plan for how to heal them? Do you need to know the emotional drivers in order to heal, or do you need to sign up for sessions with Mind Change in order to do that?
Okay. So again, thank you, Rebecca. No, you do not need to know emotional drivers to shift a disease or an ailment or a physical symptom. In fact, I would say for many people, for lay people especially, the emotional drivers get, I think, more overwhelming. They get people in their heads. Oh, it must be this, so it must be this. And that can be a little distracting and can sometimes take people more into a conscious approach.
It can become very analytical.
Yes.
And that is actually not mind change at all.
No.
It's just that my wife loves the intricacies of the hows and the possibilities and studying out people and how people work and how the body and the mind work together. So this is really the why.
Right. And so you may find that there's an emotional driver that you resonate with.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the sole cause of the way your body's doing a particular ailment. It might be part of it. It might be a driver. And sometimes those are nice to know, but they are really more from a practitioner standpoint. So then why do I do the emotional driver series at all anyway?
Great question.
It's really to help people understand there's more going on. That, hey, you've got this thing happening, this condition happening, and you've probably become very aware of it from a medical standpoint. What if there's other conditions? Have you considered, do any of these things tick a box in your past? If so, you could also be dealing with an emotional component to this. And hey, come to Mind Change, that's what we specialize in.
Yeah. And of course, you coming from how you got into this work was physical stuff, like physical symptom issues, and let's deal with that. And then it obviously blossomed into so many more things. I came in more with like relational issues, things. So, we could do a whole series on if this is happening in your relationship. And so this is just your forte in one sense and niche that you love.
It's a little hobby and I like it. And it isn't really the crux of Mind Change.
But it can help people understand. It can help us, help many people like, oh, this is interesting. This connects. Oh, the mind-body connection can be a great entryway for people to come in and go deeper. So,
and I would say it's wonderful for the body to be considered from another perspective, that there's not something wrong with it, that we don't have to throw another medication at it, or that we don't need to say it's broken or disabled in some way or diseased. I think that just considering that our body might be doing something because something from our past was maladaptive, like that's just the consideration, I think, opens doors in our body and in our mind. And so that's really my goal with the emotional drivers, is to help people have a different consideration.
Excellent. Okay, this is a long one, so I'm going to read it. Okay. I've always been petite and a small body my whole life until about 4 years ago at the age of 46, when I stopped dieting. I would love to hear more about sudden onset of weight. Ever since I've stopped dieting, I've gained a lot of weight due to the yo-yo dieting that I've done for 20 plus years. Weight loss followed by weight gain plus more. Plus, I have had unexplained weight gain in the past couple of years due to recently diagnosed Hashimoto's thyroiditis. My thyroid is being treated by medication successfully, and my blood levels are all back to normal, but I'm not losing any weight. I don't eat very much at all. I even forget sometimes, but no longer obsessed with food or dieting. I eat when I'm hungry, no longer binge, etc., etc. I don't ever want to diet again, and I don't want to restrict any foods. I also don't want to work out excessively. I want to be able to go for walks, maybe lift a little weights from time to time, for the sake of keeping my bones healthy during menopause. I don't want to have to work really hard to lose weight. Is there a mind change method that could help me release this excess weight, encourage my body to let go?
Great question. A lot of stuff in there. I always want to ask more questions. Okay. Weight loss is a complicated topic. Mm-hmm. Because it is mainly been relegated to the realm of diet and fitness. And so it's very difficult for us to think about weight in any other way than what we're eating or how we're moving our body. And those are huge components, I will say. For a naturally designed mind and body. Okay. When there is maladaptions, when there has been a possibly trauma in the past, belief systems, different ways that I'm assuming this is a woman, that the woman has been made to believe about her body, about society, all of these different things. We're really dealing with multi-layers of causation behind holding on to weight.
And then, of course, there's the environmental, like what we put in our body. And then, of course, the dieting, the yo-yo. I mean, there's a lot of factors here.
Right. Overall, if I could say there's one biggest thing that weight is saying, like the message, one of the overall messages of weight is safety and protection. When we hold excess weight in our bodies, it is for our protection in some way. And it may not make sense to us consciously. So for instance, if you've read the book, you know that I link to the ACEs study, which came from an obesity study, actually. It came from this very large obesity study. And sort of the genesis of what has become the ACEs study, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, meaning they've tracked now if you have a particular number of these set number of adverse childhood experiences, then they can kind of do a percentage of what kind of disease and issues, mental health, physical health issues you may have in the future.
Higher likelihood for X, Y, and Z.
Yes. So the way that this was birthed was the realization through actually a series of interesting comedy of errors, I guess you would say, in that study. They linked sexual trauma to obesity and found out that in this huge number of people that they were studying through an obesity study, there was a very, very high concentration of sexual trauma that had occurred with these particular women. Now, does that mean that everyone who's had a sexual trauma will be obese? No, but it is one of the primary drivers.
And does it mean that everyone who is having a hard time with their weight has had a sexual trauma?
No. But there's a correlation. So I would say let's go deeper into why would a sexual trauma cause weight gain in a large percentage of people. And then if you go deeper into the metaphysical world around weight, the way that our body does weight is really for safety. It's for padding. It's for extra, sometimes it's for distance. So that would make sense for a survivor of a sexual trauma to want to create distance between themselves and the world if the world is perceived as dangerous. If someone in the world has perpetrated against them, then to create a physical distance, if that person maybe was never taught healthy boundaries, didn't feel like they had the ability to have protected themselves in various ways, their body will do for them what they feel like they cannot do. They will put on weight.
Insulate.
They will insulate, right? Protection. Mm-hmm. And our body has all of these really crazy, wonderful, amazing, ready to go reactions to perceived threats. And so weight is one of those things. And in the mind change journey we've now thousands of people to, see as test subjects, if you will, who are doing this. There are some people who come in, have we done an interview? We have an old interview of someone, a client, and we will have her also on the podcast to talk about this. So you will meet her a little bit more. But we have interviewed her in the past. She came in for trauma, basically. And she had physical and sexual abuse more as an adult, but was in a abusive relationship. So she came in to clear a lot of this trauma that had happened to her. And she started out with the book by herself. By the time she had seen us, through doing a lot of her own self-work, she had already lost 30 pounds, I believe.
I think it was more than that.
Not trying to lose weight.
Yeah.
She wasn't trying to lose weight. She was trying to deal with so many of these old traumas that had been resurfacing, even though she'd been in a safe relationship for 20 plus years. And so a lot of this stuff was resurfacing. So she had lost the weight just by dealing with her history. Her goal wasn't losing weight. Then she came in, she did a private retreat, she did some sessions, and then she lost a bunch more weight. Again, not trying to lose weight. But the thing that was happening was she was establishing a known, felt experience, even from her past, now that things were shifting, of safety. And the safety was allowing her body to release that held protection, that held insulation. So a lot of victories in this person's question here, which is stop the dieting. I would get into why the dieting in the first place? Because it sounds like there's been dieting for all this time. So if you stop starving your body or having this give and take, really probably dysfunctional give and take with your body, and now your body feels like, okay, I'm safe to have food on a more regular basis, but knows that for 20 years, at any point, it could be restricted again. It's probably holding on for very good reason to every calorie. To every calorie, it's probably saying for 20 years, at any moment, this calorie intake or surplus could stop. So I'm going to hold on for dear life.
And then we have the stuff with thyroid as well.
Right. Well, the thyroid's telling us information right there. And so, yeah, I think this is one of those cases where it would be, we need more information to get at what are some of the primary drivers here. My guess would be, just from hearing, this is someone probably who gives more than they receive. And that's playing out in their body too with food. There's a restriction there. There has been for many, many years. There's a give and there's a take that's probably being done in a unhealthy way that mimics something from childhood. And there's this focus around weight, wanting the weight to be gone, when the body's doing it somehow probably to stay safe. And so it's just getting into that, making that peace when the body realizes it is loved, it is cared for, it is valuable, that there's not offending or incongruent messages coming in all the time from the background, like the subconscious mind from the experiences that it holds. And it's like, oh, we're actually safe. We're safe environmentally, we're safe in our minds, and it will generally release weight. But when it's safe enough to do so.
Yeah. Another little tidbit I'll give just for this person is that, this is something that you can create really a manifesto around, a mind change manifesto, which we have another video on if you want to look at that. And it's also in the book. But there's a lot of I don't wants in here. I don't do this. I don't do that. I don't want to ever diet again. I don't want to, I don't. And we talk about this in the manifesto is oftentimes we'll ask people even in session work, okay, so what do you want? They're like, well, I don't want this. And so what's important to maybe establish for this person who's asking is okay, but what do you want? And of course it relates even metaphysically of I don't want to gain weight. Okay, but your body is needing something. So it's taking all the stuff that you quote unquote don't want because it does need something. It does want something. And so give it what it wants and then it will release.
Yeah.
So
there's a relationship here that's sort of clear with lack and abundance, that I'm sure comes from a childhood of probably disorganized attachment, sometimes feeling love, but then it could be taken away at any moment, or that questioning of. So more than likely that's a design. And you got to understand your nervous system, your programming has this filter. It's running everything through, even the way that we have a relationship with food. So you clear those things, and a lot of this stuff, that's the thing we've talked about before, side effects of mind change. A lot of stuff clears up outside of our direct attention, because we're clearing up our programming and our filters. That way, then whatever we're bringing in is being filtered through a different filter. So things clean up on their own.
Yeah.
So I would say for this person, I would encourage you to get in, do some, if you haven't read the book, read the book, do some self-work. If you really want to deep dive and kind of go straight to some of the initial drivers behind all of this, yeah, I would say book a session with a practitioner, because that's really, a lot of this is subconsciously driven. And so that's what our main job is.
And again, with all of these, we are responding because we don't have the answers, because we don't have the whole picture, but we're just giving a little bit of feedback from what we see here. Okay. I'm wondering if you could address day-to-day aches and pains and how to use mind change to address them. For example, my right elbow has been hurting because I cleaned the floor a couple days ago. It's hurting pretty significantly, and I'm not sure how to address the emotional aspect of this. Again, we'll get back to the emotional aspects of things. I've just been putting arnica cream and taking ibuprofen when it interrupts my sleep. I usually go to the Louise Hay book and state the appropriate affirmation with whatever the body ailment is, but I don't really feel empowered doing this. Suggestions?
Yes. Okay. This is good. So first of all, I think it's important to understand what mind change, we are not about trying to make all the bad feelings go away, right? It might seem like that on the surface, and honestly, that's why a lot of people come in. I think that's the way I came in. I was doing all these diseases. I want them to stop. And so even if that's your initial thing, I've got pains and I've got aches and I don't want them to be there anymore, we can still help. But I'm just going to shortcut the story for you right now. Our main goal is actually to put you back into communication with your body, to open the lines of communication, to realize that your body is always speaking, and aches and pains aren't necessarily something to make go away. Now, don't suffer through them, but it's really about communication. And so often when we hear the communication, then the ache or the pain or the symptom naturally dissolves or goes away. I will say with this is interesting. So it doesn't sound like the right elbow is just randomly hurting. I scrubbed the floor and now my elbow's hurting. So listen, if I go out, we go to the gym, I ride horses, I do a lot of we just spent a week skiing. There are things that it makes sense if you're doing something like when we were skiing or snowboarding, my legs hurt. I was a little extra sore. That makes sense. I was pushing my muscles. And so I don't try to get those things to go away. I actually send them a lot of love, a lot of gratitude. I thank my body for being strong enough to do these things now. Go to the gym, lift in a certain way. So if you've got I did this and now this hurts, then there are ways to shift the pain if it's nagging. But if it's nagging for an inordinate amount of time, then we might have something deeper going on. Now, do you need to know the emotional driver behind what your right elbow is saying? No, not necessarily. I would go back to the cleaning of the floor. What was going on in the cleaning of the floor? Were you cleaning to cope? A lot of people do that. Were you cleaning because someone was about to come over? Or were you cleaning? I'd go deeper in. What was going on with the cleaning? What was going on in your mind? What stories were you telling yourself? Had something happened? Was something going to happen? What were you doing in your mind? My guess is that was already happening and you weren't really listening to it. You were coping around it. And so the elbow is maybe trying to tell you something more about what was going on inside of you, either before you were cleaning the floor, during the cleaning of the floor, or right after the cleaning of the floor. That's the key right there. Something happened right there. Now, not happened in that moment. Probably something was being triggered in the mind. And so I would encourage this person go back to that moment or right before. What was happening in your mind? Were you reminded of something? And again, consider all the other things. Like, what was going on there?
Yeah. And again, there's, like Heather said at the beginning, there's a lot of factors of, is this something, often we want to get rid of what we perceive as the problem, right? And even recently I've had 2 different clients. One of them, I think it was just yesterday, but it was like, oh, all this like pain, like build up right here in my like stomach. And I was like, well, okay, listen to it. What does it want? Like, oh, get it out. And so we worked through that a little bit, but the truth is it wasn't really shifting because that's not really what it wanted. That's what he consciously wanted. And once we really listened to, okay, what does it need? Rather than then it was like, oh, it just needs to be like heard and it needs to be spoken. And then all of a sudden this, like what came out wasn't this like terrible that came out of him. It was this like incredible self-affirmed love that needed to come out. And it was painful because it was held in. And another client, like, it's like, oh, my back. And, it's like, oh, it's always there. Just pain. It's so bad. And I was like, okay, well, what is it? What's there? It's like, oh, I just want to like smash it and get rid of it. And we tried and that wasn't going anywhere. So I was like, okay, again, what does it need? And it needed to be affirmed, to be loved, to be held. And of course, this tracks back to this particular client's like childhood and needing to be just held and loved and in all of the stuff that didn't feel good. And then we did that and then gone. Like, so these things aren't necessarily, here's the problem, let's throw it away, let's burn it, let's get it out. Sometimes there's something deeper.
Yes. And listen, with the mind change, with pattern interrupt, so again, no secrets here. We can shift pain.
Sure.
We can make pain go from a 10 to a 0. A 10 to a 2. Like, we can shift the pain. But if you're going to continue to use the mind change method as a coping mechanism to just shift away from the messaging behind it, then that's not what mind change actually is. That's not the intention of it. That isn't loving communication and connection.
Or getting to the root oftentimes.
Yes.
So there's a lot of depth there.
Yes.
Okay. This is a great one. It says, hi, my name is Lori from BC, Canada. I've read your book. Good job. Which I absolutely loved. But I would love to know more about reprogramming old beliefs. Once we are aware of the emotional drivers, man, a lot of people with emotional drivers, for a condition, can we reprogram them if we can't remember how they were programmed in the first place, and if we are unable to visualize? And if so, how? Thank you.
Okay, so yes. Can you reprogram beliefs? Absolutely. It's a little tricky to do on your own in the beginning for some people. For other people, they did it like really easily and followed the book and then it happened for them. Other people, I would say maybe even a larger percentage of people are going to need a little bit of help in the beginning.
Can I just comment on that? I think what I've noticed is that people that utilize the book and they're just like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then all these things changed. A lot of those people, initially at least, are just sort of like following what's there and not being in their head about it.
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh, okay, do this, feel the feeling, hear the hearing, see the seeing, like whatever, and then interrupt and blah, blah, blah. And they're just doing it and following it without being in their head. And then things shift. Mm-hmm. It tends to be people that are a little bit more in their head that maybe need a little training and help at the beginning, maybe with a practitioner or even just to start with something smaller than a belief, to train your brain and your body how to just go there, deconstruct, and rewire.
Yeah.
Because again, the majority of people are in their heads.
And the majority of modalities are dealing with a conscious approach. So if you have tried to deal with something before, you've likely been given a conscious approach to it. And the real power is in the subconscious mind. Mm-hmm. So if you're after a belief, let me tell you, your mind and body do not give those things up very easily. And there's a reason. Because it's got a ton of proof and a ton of references supporting it. So sometimes, and I appreciate you making that differentiation, because it is more difficult for people who are in their heads a lot, because they're trying to analyze and they're trying to fix and they're trying to like do it right and get it right.
And make meaning behind everything. And listen, even in session work, when a client is more, or I'll say dominantly in their head, we as a practitioner, we have to work harder.
Yes.
It's not just like, okay, and like, it's like, I have to go faster. I have to like interrupt whatever they're thinking and doing and all of that stuff. Now, granted, I am not dogging on people in their head. My hand is raised. That was me. Like it was harder at the beginning. And this is why Heather really didn't want to work with me as I was starting this, is because I was in my head. So I understand it. I get it. It really takes us moving out of our head and into the process, the body, the whatever's there.
Yeah, for very good reason. Some people, myself, you, many people included, have a little bit of a harder time bypassing that analytical mind, thinking that you understand it, thinking that you've got it. And that's where sometimes the emotional drivers can be trip ups for people, because then they think they get it. They think they understand it. Oh, well, this must be it. And sometimes it is, or sometimes it's layered. And then the body's basically like, no, you still don't get it. Like you really aren't getting it. And so we need to be the mediator sometimes of that process.
Yeah.
Now, something in particular, this person, Lori, I believe, mentioned she doesn't visualize, I think is what she said, correct?
Well,
if I can't visualize it.
It was reprogram in the first place if we are unable to visualize. Like I think about like the issue that came in the first place.
Okay. So that is part of it. And if you've read the book, then go back. Visualization is a percentage of how these things get held. You might be representing it more auditorily. You might be representing it more kinesthetically. There might be other ways that you're representing it that give you the key information. Mm-hmm. So let's see, if you're dealing with a belief, then let's say a not good enough belief. If I'm just going to give people some sort of basic tools here. I'm not good enough. How do I know is going to be your first question. How do I know I'm not good enough? Is it a feeling in your body? Is it a visual? Is it something you hear? Is it the little voice inside of your head that's always like, you're not good enough, you're not good enough? Is that your voice? Listen to it. Is it somebody else's voice? There's really key information in all those questions. How do you know that you're not good enough? Those are the things. Those are the building blocks. First thing that comes to your mind, it's a feeling in my body. Good, go to the feeling. Go to that feeling. Feel it really strongly. Give it a SUDS rating if you want.
For like 10 to 15 seconds, not like feel it really strongly for the next 5 minutes.
You practice it. How do I know it's there? How did it get there? I wonder why it's there. It's probably this problem. It's probably that problem.
That's all in our head.
That's all in your head. And all of that takes you out from where the real change happens.
Right.
So it's the very quick, how do I know? Is it a feeling? Pattern interrupt that. Till you're like out of it completely, and then come back in, check it again. How do you know? Maybe it's a percentage. How good enough are you? Are you 100% not good enough? Are you 50% not good enough? Then that's the way. You just chip away at that. Now, are you going to likely in your self-work get to the very like deep primary imprint root of when you were 3 years old and you watched your mom say she's not good enough, and that logged, and you loved mom and wanted to connect with mom better, and so now you're not going to be good enough too to stay connected with mom? You're likely not going to hit that in your own self-work. That's probably going to come out more in practitioner work, because we deep dive into the subconscious mind, and it is very difficult for you to consciously deep dive into your own subconscious mind. It can happen, but it usually happens with years of practice and training. And you have to have some initial victories first.
Yeah.
But that's how you shift those things. We absolutely can shift beliefs. But first you have to know how you're doing the belief.
And I would say even when there's like these deep beliefs there, and maybe maybe this person, I don't know, maybe they've already worked on a lot of other things. Maybe they've already had success and they're just kind of, okay, there's some deep beliefs here. But if you or somebody else is like, okay, I'm just getting started, let me like dive into the deep beliefs, I would say maybe put the brakes there and let's just go after like one little thing that maybe bothers you up to like a 2 or 3. Show yourself, show your brain the victories of shifting things and moving things that are like, oh, this happened the other day and it kind of bothered me. Like shift that until it's like, oh, actually that doesn't bother me at all. In fact, now I have complete compassion or love for this person or this situation, right? Show yourself how to find victory. Then you can go deeper and deeper and deeper.
Because remember, mind change is not cognitive reframing. It isn't. A lot of people do that and call it mind change. A lot of people do that and call it mind change. But that isn't really what it's about. We're about actually changing the neural pathway that contains the information. And then even back deeper, those initial experiences, beliefs, genetic dispositions, and everything that are informing you of who you are. Mm-hmm. So the intention is to go deep into that and change those things.
Excellent. Okay, we got a couple more here. So it says, and this question / comment is in regards to a post that you did on epilepsy.
Okay.
So this is from Meg. It says, yes, same with my daughter. These are some things about the epilepsy. Hers developed shortly after a deep loss of a neighbor who was like a second mom to her. And then she witnessed a terrible accident at a birthday party. The last straw was kids at the neighborhood playground showing horror movie pictures on their phones. She slept in our room scared that night and had her first seizure that morning. We do not have, and this is in response to some of the things of like, maybe epilepsy has to do with these drivers. We do not have a pressure-filled home either. It is very warm. But my home and my parents' home was very different. Can this be generational with a child? Kind of, and this is alluding to, maybe you can talk about the epigenetics and things that can be passed down, even if it's not present for that child's home in the moment.
Okay, so with this particular question, I would first address that Meg, you said it was? Mm-hmm. Meg, the answer's pretty clear already. I don't know if we even have to go to genetics. Mm-hmm. She had very present, and you're aware of these, traumatic experiences that overwhelmed her brain's ability to cope. That's what causes seizures and epilepsy, is really an overwhelm of the brain's hardware and its ability to cope. That does not mean that this child has a unsafe home environment. They've had outside traumatic triggers that overwhelmed the brain. So I would say, my question, Meg, would be like, are you thinking that her brain got overwhelmed simply because you may have had a challenging upbringing and therefore genetically she was predisposed to her brain overwhelming easier? Possibly, but I don't think you even really need to go there. The triggers are clear for her, for this child. Those need to be cleared and her brain set back to safety. And thank goodness she has a safe home environment. Mm-hmm. Thank goodness, because her likelihood of coming back into alignment is a lot higher in a safe home environment.
Right.
What I would say is, if, Meg, you understand that your childhood was challenging or in various ways might be contributing epigenetically to your children, clear that. Meg, you clear that for you, not for your daughter, not for your child. Clear that for you. It will impact your children.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But for the epilepsy, for the seizure diagnosis, for the child, the traumas need to be cleared. And they're very clear. And what a complete and absolute gift, Meg, that you have tracked these things. So I would say clean up those things, and that child has a brighter future ahead to clear those things.
Awesome. Okay, final question. says, how can I get my husband on the same page with me regarding my healing journey as it relates to mind change? This is from Gretchen.
Gretchen, bless you. Oh, you are in good company, friend. Yeah. Do your work. It really is the only way. Do your work. Change your things. Live your best, highest, most authentic, most healed life. And it is nearly impossible to ignore.
We just had, last month we came back from our retreat, the Transformative Wellness Retreat in Belize that we hosted. And it was so incredible and beautiful to be there. It just happened to be that almost all the participants, save one, all the participants were couples.
Yeah, first time we'd ever had that.
And all of the participants that were newer to mind change, so maybe except a couple of the couples, all their husbands were like, I don't really know what I'm getting into here, but my wife's been doing this for a bit. I've seen the change. There's something to this. I got to figure this out. She wanted to come to this. I'm here. And then the massive amounts of change that happened in the husband. So I will just say that it is not uncommon in today's world to have women that are a little bit more open to going after the depth of change and transformation and all these things. And for the husbands to kind of trail along afterwards. My hand is up again. I am one of those, right? Because I didn't really see the problems. Like my wife had all these health issues and all these past traumas. And I was like, things are pretty good. Like everything, but they weren't actually. But for me, I thought they were. And so it just took some time of seeing the radical change in my wife. And then really what that brought up for me is like, okay, I can't be the same person anymore in this relationship. And it forced me in one sense to take a step forward. So yes, you are in good company.
I'm just reflecting now. Man, this seems so obvious, but I think that the reason we had so many married couples at that particular retreat is how much work we've done on our marriage.
I am just seeing that now too.
Because we've done, if you've followed us for any length of time, you'll know that we've done so much work individually on ourselves.
Sure.
And that, honestly, that created a catalyst for us having to work on our marriage. It was a do or die for us. It was, if we don't now work on what we've collectively put together based on because we had built this marriage based on our previous selves and all of our previous stuff. Whoa, that was fun. We had done so much work individually on ourselves, which I think is the way it has to go.
It has to. You got to start with yourself first. You can't, and I've had people that are like, oh, we're new to mind change. We want to come and do this as a couple in like a session together. I'm like, like you need to do your own stuff first.
Yes. Our marriage was the next step. And then working on our marriage and then working on the sexuality. And we're knee deep in all of the masculine, feminine stuff right now. So hey, look at us. That's good on us. We did our work and it reflected in our business, which it does. It always does. But yes, so for this person, for Gretchen, either way, it's going to be good for you. Any way that it goes is going to be good for you if you're working on you and doing your work, getting to your highest self and unlayering and coming back into alignment with your design. It's going to be better for you, no matter what the outcome is on the outside. And people closest to us have to notice. They will notice. It might not always make them happy. So they may notice in a negative way. And just any bit of noticing means there's change happening. And sometimes in the noticing, I would say maybe more of a masculine trait is, it doesn't necessarily mean men and women both have both, but is to ignore and avoid. So sometimes if a lot of change is happening, then the significant other or family member might be like, no, I don't see any change. Nothing. It's not working. And that might, and if they're a little bit agitated by that, means they probably are noticing things, but it's making them uncomfortable. And that makes sense because you didn't come in this way and now you're changing. Now all these different things are happening, and that is challenging their, like how they show up in the relationship.
Yeah, I definitely was 100% behind Heather's body healing. I was not at all behind her personality, her emotional evolution, her spiritual evolution, her relational evolution. I was not happy about that change at the beginning.
And I didn't know it was coming.
Yeah, it's not like that was it. But because when one person changes, the other person has to face that. And so if you read our second book, the one we co-authored, like I talk about that and like how that was tough for me at the beginning of like, I just wanted things to be the way they were with her being healthy, but that wouldn't fit into our programming.
Yes.
Her programming of needing a savior, my programming of needing to be the savior. Like if she's good, that takes me out of the equation. So mind change, it wrecks your life in a good way.
Oh gosh, let that not be the tagline.
It just, whatever you thought your life was, it messes it up, and it makes it all, I don't know, like different. But then if you actually are willing to come in for the landing, man, I'm so glad for the way that mind change messed my life up. So glad for the way it messed my old version of marriage up, the way that it messed my old version of parenting and life and myself up. I needed that. I didn't know I needed it. I thought everything was perfect. But man, I'm so grateful that things can shift the way they can.
I may lose some people on this particular analogy, but it was kind of like when I shifted from PC to Mac. Like, or Apple, how do you say? Yeah, see, this is how techie I am. But I was like diehard PC, not wonderful at it, but
used to it.
I was so used to it. It's how I did everything, how I composed every email, how I did every document. And I was so used to it. Changing over to Mac, even though I know now it was far superior in and connected with a lot of other things. It was so uncomfortable to learn in the beginning that I would be like, this Mac stinks. This is stupid. This doesn't work. I was angry and I was frustrated. And at times I wanted to throw it across the room because it didn't fit with the way I had been doing things for all of the maybe at that point 10 years that the internet had been around. Aging myself a little bit. But yes, it was uncomfortable. And now I won't even touch a PC because I'm like, it speaks a language I don't even want to know.
And hopefully we aren't losing our Android PC people out there.
Yeah, I'm talking way back in the day. I still feel a little bit like that, but.
So how do we get our, spouses on board? It just starts with us. That's the way it starts.
Yep. Absolutely. All right.
Well, these are great questions today.
Stuff.
Thank you guys for sending these in. Thank you for putting your heart out there, your mind out there, and for wanting to just hear our responses. Again, we don't have answers for everything, but here's our thoughts.
Yes. So, thanks everyone who submitted a question. Please keep your eye out for the next one. And it'll probably be in a few months or something like that. We'll be throwing the call out there. In the meantime, if you have a question, a burning question that you do want us to answer on the next one, where should they send it?
Podcast@mindchange.com.
Podcast@mindchange.com. Just put in the subject question, Q&R. Just Q&R. There you go. All right, and we'll get those. So thanks. And thanks for joining us again on another episode of the Mind Change Podcast, where we are changing the world one mind at a time.